Hi there, everyone. My name is Samuel Simmons, and this is my case study review for EDL 854, Missing Booster Club Funds. Just a quick summary of the case study. We are dealing with Mr. Daniel Stevens, who is the one and only administrator at George Washington Middle School, has outstanding support from the community that helps assist him throughout the building. They volunteer on a daily basis, but unfortunately, at the last home basketball game, $50 came up missing at the gate. Thus, someone is responsible for taking money away from the students. So that's just a brief summary of this case study. So what do we know? We know that we're dealing with George Washington Middle School, and they only have one administrator, Mr. Daniel Stevens. The approximate number of students is 450, which reminds me a lot of the middle schools here in the Kansas City, Kansas school district. Extremely supportive community. A long list of volunteers that are available through the PTA that can come and volunteer during the school day, as well as help support athletic events. Parents of the athletes are extremely vested in the community, and they volunteer in the building on a daily basis, weekly basis. And Mr. Stevens relies on that parental support because, again, he is the only administrator in the building, so he relies on that support from the PTA and Booster Club. We are dealing with an individual, Mrs. Bowman, who has three children. Two have came through the middle school and transitioned to the high school, her two sons. And now she has a daughter in the seventh grade who has some outstanding achievements in which she would love for the building to support her child on a trip in which Mr. Stevens informed Mrs. Bowman that the PTA, funds were not should not be used for one student. And unfortunately, Mrs. Bowman is also the individual who was working the gate in which the $50 came up missing. So that is definitely some of the things that we know for this case study. So what do we need to know? There is several things that were circling in my mind as I was processing through this case study. The first thing that I need to know, is there $50 really missing? Because the case study mentioned that there were 10 tickets that were discarded. But if those 10 tickets were discarded, then the $50 that would have came from those tickets would not have counted towards the amount of money that would have been the total amount for the gate. Of those 10 tickets, I mean, the case study mentioned that those 10 tickets are worth $50, but in my mind, I know I've been to a lot of athletic events. I don't know if children got in free or if they cost $2 or $3. So there's just some things right there that come to mind that I need to know, regarding those discarded tickets and why, Mr. Stevens thought that those 10 tickets are worth the value of $50. But if the money was taken, and that's a likely scenario, then we need to know who took the money. Mr. Stevens ran into one of the community members, Mr. Dumas, who said he paid with the $50 bill, in which there was no $50 bill in the bag. So maybe the $50 bill was changed out, for a $100 bill, or maybe a patron who came in saw the 50 and wanted the 50, and they changed out the 50 for two 20s and a 10. I mean, all possible scenarios that could have helped that could have happened that evening. I need to know how many volunteers worked the gate. Was it just one person selling tickets, two persons? What was the procedures in place? What procedures did Mr. Daniels have in place for the number of volunteers at the gate? Did they all agree to discard the tickets? Why were the tickets discarded? Why were they not held on to just for more proof that they were damaged? I was also curious that it said that Mr. Stevens had specific procedures in place to count the money, but it seemed like the security guard escorted him to his car, and not the bank that is suggested in the case study. So I'm just curious, what other procedures does Mr. Stevens have in place to count and protect the money? And why, with such a strong community support, why were teachers not used? There could be a lead teacher, someone to help facilitate and manage, especially athletic events that get crazy, that overcapacity like this basketball game was. So just several things that I need to know in order to continue to process through this case study. So what is the problem? Obviously, the problem is that student money is missing. Student money from the activity fund that is used to support all the students in the building is allegedly missing from the gate. And we need to obviously find, who is the individual responsible for that money. Significant problem that I saw is that there's only one administrator, and for an approximate school size of 450 students, especially middle school students, usually that would tend to lend itself to having another administrator, or some type of lead teacher, or a teacher who could help facilitate some of those duties from Mr. Stevens. Another problem is just lack of teacher and student volunteers that could have been present at the day of the event, this basketball game. With such a strong, supportive community, someone violated the trust, of Mr. Stevens and George Washington Middle School. And I'm curious if there's been any previous concerns in the past. Another problem is those torn tickets. Why were they discarded? Um, who chose to discard them? How come they were not, put to the side and saved? And then again, just why safeguards were not in place, or followed, from start to finish over this athletic event. Is all of those are the problem for George Washington and this case study. So strategies to implement. So there are several things that if I were the administrator, I would need to do. Conduct a thorough investigation, not accusing anyone of anything, but I need to meet with all the volunteers who were present. Anyone who may have saw something, I need to confirm that there was actually a $50 bill that was paid for, as Mr. Dumas suggested, and if so, who saw it and where did it go? I need to review my financial controls and my safeguards for admission tickets, which is probably one of the first things I'm going to do. I need to review my procedures for the end of the event, in which I should have had an event coordinator who was responsible for collecting everything from the ticket sellers, from the concession stands and the gate. And once that event coordinator, processed all the financial reports, then I would have taken it from them, and that could have possibly eliminated some of the discrepancies that we find in this case study. I would also, another strategy I would implement is I would, in order to build capacity in my teachers, I would have a supportive group of teachers that could become lead teachers, and take on the roles or duties of an assistant principal. Just again to help, help me if I were the principal of George Washington Middle School in time of need, especially with the 450 students in my building. And I would definitely pull in student volunteers to help, manage events that's just like building the capacity in my teachers. I want to build my capacity in my students. So these are all strategies that I would look to implement, to eliminate discrepancies and occurrences like this. So category 3, the resolution promoting the success for all students. So what is best for students? Well, what is best for students is that their money isn't missing in the first place. So again, those monies from that activity fund are there to support student activities in the building. So again, that's it's going to be best for students if they have all of their money and it's not missing. It's going to be best for students if I have specific safeguards in place to protect their student funds so that events like this, occurrences like this, do not ever happen again. It's going to be best for students if I get them involved, if I get teachers involved, if I work to build the capacity in both my students and my teachers to help to assist me if I were the principal of George Washington Middle School, so that, again, occurrences like this, dilemmas like this, do not affect our building in a negative way. So reflection. So category 4, reflection. What was I thinking, feeling, valuing, unresolved issues, or anything that's open for further investigation? So some things I were thinking, is where's my building volunteers? Again, that's my students and my teachers. I was thinking, what's going on with the financial controls? It seems as though Mr. Stevens had some procedures in place that he has in his building, but again, they weren't specific enough, or they weren't followed, and it was definitely missing some of those things, especially with the event coordinator, who should not be a ticket seller. If that was Mrs. Bowman's role, then obviously those need to be changed. The financial reports, it seems like everything went through just Mrs. Bowman and then came directly to me. So again, there was not another individual that that was responsible for calculating those reports. And I need something else I was thinking about was to support my students. I want to be able to support my students to the best of my ability. And when we have students who, like Mrs. Bowman's daughter, who have some outstanding accomplishments, what can we do as a building to help support families who have situations like that? What was I feeling? Obviously upset that allegedly $50 were stolen from my students. Unacceptable, and it cannot happen. I was feeling upset because there's such a strong support system at George Washington Middle School, that the community, someone in the community would violate the trust. What do I value? Well, I definitely value community support. That's important. You got to have that sense of community from that from the school community. You got to have that in the building. I mean, it helps with the climate and the culture, having that positive climate and culture in the building. And what's open for further investigation, again, is there money really missing, or was it cashed out? Was it supplemented for additional funds? Again, and what's the deal with those tickets? So reflection on Standard 8. So how did I, as the educational leader, promote the academic success and personal well-being of every student by ensuring effective and efficient management of the school or district to promote student social and academic learning? And this is where we're going to get into specific evidence. So knowledge of school management, fiscal operations. So again, that comes back to financial controls for ticket sales. That comes back to the knowledge of school management and fiscal operations, come back to having financial controls in place, safeguards in place, such as having an event coordinator, someone who is not a ticket seller, to reconcile ticket sales at the end of the event before submitting that information over to me for review, and then just making sure that I follow all district policy. I need to make sure that in order to to know that I have a strong knowledge of management fiscal operation, I need to make sure that I know those things and that I train any of my student, teachers, community volunteers, so all my stakeholders understand how the policies and procedures in the building, in the school building. So evidence, commitment to trusting community stakeholders, involvement in the management process. I mean, obviously the trust has been violated, but again, there will be a thorough investigation, in which I would have to communicate everything that I find and everything that happened to all of my stakeholders. um, again, to continue trusting my community stakeholders. There's some things that I can do by alternating PTA and Booster Club, the presidents and or members on a frequent basis. And then again, just stated, I need to make sure that my volunteers are trained, they attend monthly meetings, make sure that that my safeguards are followed so that procedures to prevent future occurrences from happening are in place, and possibly continue to build the capacity in my teachers by allowing one to or a few to become a lead teacher, and maybe even supplement those with some of the information found in the admissions ticket chapter. So ensure organizational systems are regularly monitored, modified, and problem-solving skills are utilized. So again, this comes back to making sure that I am frequently, reviewing procedures and policies that I have in the building through, my financial controls, making sure that my safeguards are in place, making sure that staff is trained, and stakeholders and community members are, they know and understand all of the procedures that we have in place at George Washington Middle School, making sure that my event coordinator helps oversee all events, and then just intentionally thinking through and identifying possible dilemmas will help me better plan for any discrepancies or occurrences that may happen, throughout any activity or any athletic events throughout the problem. So that is my case study for EDL 854, Missing Booster Club Funds. I hope you enjoyed it. Take care.